UFC 236 in Atlanta, and of course all of New Zealanders are buzz about Israel Adesanya's massive matchup, huge opportunity for him on the world stage, and Dan Hooker joins me as he always does, Dan, but there's a lot of supporting fights as well, so we're going to pick our way through these one by one and just get your thoughts on all of them. A lot of fighters I've never heard of, and probably a couple you hadn't heard of either.
Well, I know them now. I know them quite well now.
Awesome. All right, so let's kick it off in the women's division in the flyweight. We've got Lauren Muller against Poliana Botello. Botello goes in as a warmish favourite.
Yep, so Muller's a boxer, Botello's a kicker, so they're both strikers coming into this matchup. So this fight comes down to whose range this fight is played out, and obviously Muller wants it at boxing range, Botello wants it a bit further out in kicking range, and from watching their fights and studying them, I feel like the advantage goes to Botello. She's got an 86% KO ratio, and most of those KOs, 60 KO wins, are via kicks. So she carries a lot of power in those kicks, which is relatively uncommon for a woman. And so I'm backing Botello to be able to keep it on the outside with her kicking game, and it might be good to put a bit of money on the stoppage coming into this one.
Beautiful. Botello by stoppage. Next up, Montel Jackson is the shortest priced favourite on the whole card against Andre Sukanth. Something like that. But yeah, $1.20 against $4.20, $4.25-ish. Montel Jackson, the warmest of favourites on the card.
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit closer than that. Jackson has 4 wins via punches, so he's a boxer and has good defensive wrestling. He's won his last fight via submission, via Darce choke. I think 71% of his fights are via stoppage, via knockout. So he carries a lot of power coming into this one. Sukanth, he has a very good right hand. Most of his wins, 62% of his wins are via KO as well. So I'm feeling like he's going to back his striking coming into this fight. But it comes down to who carries the weight behind their punches, and that'll go to Jackson. So I'm backing Jackson via KO.
Next on the prelims in welterweight division, Curtis Melindu against Belal Muhammad. Pretty close, but Muhammad is the slight favourite here, but it's a bit of a coin flip fight, this one.
Yeah, and I feel like it is. Muhammad's a boxer wrestler. He's a grinder. He likes to box his way into the clinch, press his opponent against the cage, and then just hang off them there. And constantly working, but he'll just grind his opponents out. He's the definition of a grinder. 71% of his wins go to the judges, and he wins on points. Just that exact same style, forcing him into the cage, beating him up against the cage, taking him down, beating him up there, and taking the decision win. Mullin is a super long striker. He's got a 78-inch reach, which is incredibly long. 35% KO ratio and no submission wins. So I feel like the 7-inch reach advantage might be a bit difficult for Muhammad to overcome at the start of the fight. But as the fight draws on, I'm looking for him to get on the inside and grind Melinda out and walk away with the decision.
Decision to Muhammad. Then we go into the first of the main prelims. Boston Boom Boom Salmon is a slight favourite again against Khalid Taha. And we've had a few of these UFCs where there's pronounced favourites. This is a really even card. And the first of the prelims, Salmon against Taha, another close one.
Yeah, I feel like the bookie's just getting a bit smarter. Yeah, this one is a close matchup. Salmon's making his UFC debut. He come through on the Dana White Contender Series. He likes his hands. He's a former amateur boxing champion. 4 of his 6 wins are via KO. Taha, he's a striker as well. 58% via KO. Striker versus striker. Pick a matchup. I'm leaning towards Salmon just from watching tape. He has the sharper, well, he's better defensively. He has the better defensive boxing. So me, I'm always going to side with the guy who's got the better defense, edging out a decision win, Salmon.
Then we got Maxi Griffin against Zelim Medev. Another really close one, which we've given the favoritism slightly towards Max Griffin.
Yeah, this one, in my opinion, is not so close. Max Griffin, he's got a 2-4 UFC record, so he's had some very hard fights. He's got some good wins over the likes of Max Perry, and his only losses have been to very good guys. The only time he's been stopped in the UFC or stopped in his entire career is by the number 1 ranked Colby Covington. So that kind of shows the level of competition that he's been up against. Medev, he's a bit of an unknown. He's an undefeated Russian fighter. He has 3 KOs in under 30 seconds. So that's probably why the UFC signed him so quickly at 8-0. Relatively inexperienced to other guys on the card. But 6 of those fights, going back and looking at the records, would be against nobody. 2 combined wins for those 6 fighters. So for 6 fighters, 6 of his opponents have only had 2 wins combined. So that shows the level of his competition. So when I'm looking at this fight, I have to go with who has the stronger resume and who has shown that they are capable of beating the best guys in the world. And that to me comes down to Max Griffin. And I think he'll put on a classy performance in this one and pick up a decision.
And we go to Wilson Reyes, number 5 ranked, but the number 6 ranked is the favourite, and that is Alejandro Pantoja, who's a really busy fighter.
Yeah. No, he is. They're both very high-level grapplers. Reyes, 23 of his wins. Of 23 wins, he's got a mix of decisions and submissions. He's never won a fight via KO in 23 fights. Pantoja has an even spread. Even though he is a grappler, he has a mix of decision, submission, and knockout victories. They're about even. And generally when you get 2 high-level grapplers competing against each other, they kind of cancel that aspect of the game out and it becomes a striking matchup. So in this one, I definitely give the striking edge to Pantoja. When it's forced to become a striking match, he just has more tools on the feet. He can kick, he can punch, whereas Reyes is really just forward pressure and goes for the takedown. So I'm going to back Pantoja in this one via decision.
Then into the lightweights, we've got Jalen Turner against Matt Ravallo. And looking at their physical stats, Turner's very tall, very rangy, 6 inches taller, 6 inches longer reach. That's got to tell in this division.
Yeah. No, it does in this fight. It'll be a big aspect. Turner, he's 1-1 in the UFC. He's coming off his first win over the Australian boy, Callum Potter, on that last Adelaide card. He stopped him in the first round. He's got that 77-inch reach. He's got an 88% KO ratio, so he's very heavy-handed. He's a southpaw striker. Ravallo, he's got 1 draw, 1 loss in the UFC. He was previously undefeated before that. And he comes in with just the bull in the china shop approach. He comes in and he doesn't have any range finding. He just comes out and he throws heavy and he looks to get his opponent out of there. And Turner in this one is just the more sound striker. I feel like he's going to find his range early and he's really going to pick Ravallo apart. You can do that bull in the china shop coming up to the UFC, but then once you get in the UFC, you really have to adapt your game and adjust your approach. And I just don't think Ravallo has the tools to adjust his game at this stage in his career. And I'm picking Turner to pick him apart and stop him in this fight.
Stoppage to Turner. Then OSP, light heavyweights. OSP against Nikita Krylov. OSP's favourite. I thought he would have been not a hot favourite, but more of a favourite than he is. Price-wise, it's pretty close, this one.
Yep. Might be a bit worth putting your money on St. Preux coming into this one, because Krylov, he's 14 of his 24 wins are via submissions, and in 30 fights for Nikita Krylov, win or lose, he's never seen the judges before. He must hate them or something. He's got something against judges because he's never seen them in 30 professional fights, which in itself is an incredible feat. This is his second stint in the UFC. He's 1 fight into the stint. He lost his last fight via submission to Jan Blachowicz. And St. Preux, I feel like if you've been following UFC, you know this guy quite well. He's got a strong wrestling base, heavy-handed southpaw striker, former title challenger. He challenged John Jones for the belt, so he's been competing at the best of the division for a very long time. The interesting key in this is 66% takedown defense for St. Preux. coming into this one. So I feel like he has the wrestling, the defensive wrestling, and the wrestling base to stop the takedown, shut down the submission game of Nikita Krylov, and really put it on him on the feet. And I'm picking St. Preux via KO.
Convince me. Alan Juban in the welterweights against Dwight Grant. A couple of strikers here. And again, height and reach advantage to Dwight Grant.
Yep, striker versus striker matchup in this one. They're both coming off pretty convincing KO victories. Juban is one of my favorite guys to watch. He's one of the best strikers in the welterweight division that I always keep my eye on when he's getting in there. 69% KO ratio and no submissions coming into this one. Grant, he's fairly new to the UFC, but he's a highly touted AKA, so that's American Kickboxing Academy. That's one of the biggest gyms in the US. He's been one of their highly touted prospects for a very long time. Two fights in the UFC. He's 1-1. He's got 78% KO ratio. So both of these boys are coming in here to fight. I just think it's going to be the work rate of Juban. It'll just get him ahead in this fight. He's non-stop when he gets in there, whereas Grant looks for the one big shot to get his opponent out of there. Whereas Juban, bell to bell, he's working constantly. So in this one, it's going to come down to the work rate of Alan Juban. I feel like defensively, he's sound enough to avoid that one big strike from Grant, and he's going to pick up the decision.
It's our first underdog that's been tipped out. Eric Anders was probably one of the best nicknames. Ya boy.
Yeah, boy.
Ya boy. Against Khalil Roundtree Jr. Anders comes into this one as a favourite.
Okay, so Roundtree, he's quite good as of late. He's got a 71% KO ratio, and he's shown that he can knock anyone out in the world because he knocked out Gokhan Saki. So Gokhan Saki is one of the best heavyweight kickboxers in the world. He made the move to the UFC. He was Roundtree was a big dog coming into that one, and he put up the big upset. So he's shown that he has some very good power. And to me, he's shown an incredible development in his game as of late. You know, he showed he had some very big holes early on in his UFC career, but he's developed very quickly in the last few fights. And now watching him, I've seen some very impressive things. Anders 64% KO ratio, former middleweight, making the move up to light heavyweight. This is really a pick 'em in my eyes, but I'm going to edge it to Roundtree just because of the development he's shown late. And it's been, I feel like he's got more tools coming into this than Anders.
Right. Roundtree Jr. as an underdog. And then, of course, the big one for New Zealand, the middleweight interim title fight, Kelvin Gastelum, Israel Adesanya, 7-inch height advantage, Israel, 9-inch reach advantage. I was going to say, does it change his game plan? But he's such a loose, fluid fighter, isn't he? Can you take your eye patch off and analyse this fight without the friendship?
Yeah, no, I can. We'll get the basics out of the way. Israel, 81% of his fights, he picks up the knockout. He's undefeated, 5-fight streak. Gastelum, he's very well-rounded. He's got an even split, submissions, decisions, knockouts. He's on a 2-fight win streak, KO over Michael Bisping, and then a split decision over Jacare Souza, one of the toughest guys.
Good opponents.
Yeah, one of the toughest guys in the division. He's a southpaw inside boxer, and he's got a very powerful overhand left, which he manages to collect. That's the one he knocked out Michael Bisping with. In this fight, though, I don't feel like he's going to be looking to strike at the start of this fight. I think he's going to be looking to wrestle. I feel like the problem with Gastelum is that he's, in his past fights, he doesn't really dictate where the fight takes place. He's kind of just so well-rounded that wherever his opponent takes him, he can adjust. And, you know, if they want to wrestle, he'll counter-wrestle. If they want to punch, he'll counter-punch. Like, he's just flows and goes with the motions. But in this one, he's going to have to dictate the fight, and he's going to have to try and press Israel against the cage. And to me, it's just the reach advantage on the outside is just too much. The 9-inch reach advantage, and Gastelum's really been faulted by this in the past. You'd go back and watch his fight against Neil Magny, where he was at a reach disadvantage, and he was really frustrated on the outside by that reach disadvantage. I feel like Israel's just going to pick him apart nice and long, Gastelum's going to start getting desperate and he's going to open up the KO. So my money's on KO for Israel. But I asked him just before I came here, I asked Israel how he thinks he's going to win and where the punters best spend their money. And he said it wouldn't be bad. He said, this is word for word, it wouldn't be bad putting 50 on a submission.
On a submission?
So that's from the horse's mouth.
Has he ever submitted someone?
Never. My money is on the knockout. He's calling submission.
He's playing with you. Has he even tried to take someone down?
He's got a few takedowns in the UFC. He attempted a couple on Derek Brunson, I believe, as well as Brad Tavares. So he's getting close. He reckons he just might be there.
That wouldn't surprise, actually.
It'll be paying a fair bit. I say a submission will be paying a fair bit.
All right. Well, it's probably, you just don't put 50 on, put 5 on, because it'll be paying a heap. And then the big one, Maxi Holloway, who's still a young man, but he's been around UFC for a long, long time. Very warm favourite at about the $1.36 mark against Dustin Poirier at $3.16. This is for the light interim title, light heavyweight. Lightweight interim title.
Yep, Max Holloway's moving up to lightweight to challenge for the title. This is a rematch of a 2012 fight. I thought I'd mention it, but it's not really that important.
7 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and Max has made some incredible improvements in his game. Poirier won that fight by a mounted arm triangle. Very good fight. Interesting to go back and watch, but just watching, they're completely different animals. Both of them, I'm speaking. Poirier, he's a southpaw, heavy-handed puncher, but he does struggle against guys who have quicker hands than him, and he's unable to cut off. If you go back to his fights against Michael Johnson, you go back to his fights against Conor McGregor, those are two guys who are very fast-handed, who he was unable to cut off and push against the cage. I feel like Poirier's going to want to play this one like he played the Anthony Pettis fight, whereas he forced the light-handed Pettis back against the cage, and he made him wrestle, which accumulates the blood in his hands, and it slows down his punches. Weidman did it to Gastelum as well, leading into that fight. But that's what he's going to want to do. He needs to slow Holloway down because he's just not quicker enough. I just feel like Max Holloway's footwork is too good. He's one of my favorite guys to watch. Just watch his feet when you go back and watch his films. It's incredible. He's shown that he's incredibly hard to cut off against the cage and incredibly hard to take down. I did a breakdown for it, never got shown because the Khabib fight didn't end up going ahead with Max Holloway, but I was picking Max Holloway coming into that fight just because his hand fighting and his takedown defense against the cage is so good. I thought that Khabib would struggle to cut him off. So for Poirier to do it, I think is quite the feat, which forced it into a striking match in the center. And I feel like Max Holloway's work rate is too high. He's got the faster hands and he has the higher work rate. Then I feel like he just peppers Poirier with his boxing, wears him out, and cruises to a decision.
UFC 236 in Atlanta. All those picks there brought to you by Dan the Hangman Hooker.